Okay, so this shiur is entitled a dream analysis in halacha. Okay, and I want to, like I do with many of these shiur, I want to moderate expectations. So I'll tell you what the shiur is and what the shiur is not. So I view this shiur as kind of a sequel to last week's shiur on fingernail cutting, because it is dealing with a topic that when you encounter it in the halachic literature, it looks crazy, and then you find out, oh, there are legitimate sources that this comes from, and like I wanted to look at like how to make sense of those sources, and like last week, our focus was really primarily on the halacha, and then from the halacha radiating outwards or backwards into like what these halachic positions reflect about the phenomena we're dealing with. Okay, so I this is a sequel in that sense. Okay.
Question.
Yes.
I wasn't here last week. You're saying crazy in terms of like this actually is something that has halacha. This is in halacha as opposed to not being in halacha.
I'll show you what I mean by crazy when I show you the first source. Okay. Stay tuned. Okay. What this shiur is not is this is not a comprehensive treatment of the topic of dreams. Okay. There's a lot that Judaism says about dreams, and we will talk to a certain extent at the beginning about like you know the in vague sketches like what the outline is, but I'm not going through every opinion on dreams. And I'm not even going through every halachic opinion. I'm really only going to look into the halachos of the two sources that I go to for halacha, one being for practical halacha and for like a theoretical overview, the Aruch Shulchan, the other being the Rambam. Okay. In terms of a model of Torah, in terms of like how I envision the Torah system functioning, Rambam is my go-to. But because we don't paskin straight out of the Rambam, then I go to the Aruch Shulchan for my like, you know, my default practical go-to halacha guide. And of course, I ask my posek if I have a shaila, but like Aruch Shulchan is where I go to. So I just want to focus on those two sources, not a comprehensive view. And we're not even going to be going to a comprehensive view of like the opinions about dreams in general. For example, you'll find a lot of stuff in Kabbalistic literature, in like, you know, non-Kabbalistic mystical approaches and other stuff like that. We're not going to really touch on that. We're just going to focus on what the Aruch Shulchan and the Rambam say. And then how we think about that. This is also not an overview of different contemporary theories in psychology or in neurology or in whatever about dreams. We will mention Freud because that's the only approach to dream interpretation that I am familiar with, but we're only going to pull out one specific thing from Freud. We're not even going to like do an overview of Freud's theory. Okay, so those are the.
And we're not going to talk about Matthew Walker.
We're not going to talk about Matthew Walker. Yes. Yes. The author of what's this book called? Why We Sleep, which is both a useful book, but also someone who we have found has some problems with the way he presents his research. So take it with a grain of salt. Okay. Anyway, I actually want to start off with one of the quotations before we get to the thing that looks crazy. I want to start off with one of the quotations that we ended off with last time in the fingernail cutting shiur, which is from Hirsch's letters. Okay, so Hirsch says, and this is the exact same excerpt we did last time, in the letters on Aggadata, letter number 4. He says, in my opinion, the first principle that every student of Chazal's statements must keep before his eyes is the following. Chazal were sages of God's law, the receivers, transmitters, and teachers of his Toros, his mitzvos, and his interpersonal laws. They did not especially master the natural sciences, geometry, astronomy, or medicine, except insofar as they needed them for knowing, observing, and fulfilling the Torah. We do not find that this knowledge was transmitted to them from Sinai. Nowadays, too, it is enough for the non-specialist to know about any of these areas of knowledge, whatever contemporary experts teach that is generally accepted as true. This applies to the lawyer vis-a-vis all other areas, to the mathematician and the astronomer regarding the natural sciences, and to the expert on flora regarding all other areas. We expect none of them to seek out the truth and satisfy his inclinations in any field other than his own specialty. Moreover, last paragraph, even in the area where one is an expert, it is neither possible for him nor expected of him to know everything through personal investigation and experience. Most of his knowledge rests upon the investigation of others. If they have erred, it is not his fault. It is sufficient and praiseworthy if his knowledge encompasses all that is accepted as true at his time and place and generation. The greatness of his wisdom is in no way belittled if in a later generation it is discovered that some of the things he maintained or accepted on the authority of others are unreliable. The same is true for Chazal in these areas. The greatest of them knew all the wisdom and science of all the great non-Jewish scholars whose wisdom and teachings became famous in their generations. So summarizing, Chazal were not experts in anything other than Torah and what you need to fulfill Torah. There are lots of other areas of Chachma which they studied in order to master things that are relevant to Torah, but they were not necessarily experts in the other areas, and that knowledge was not given to them at Sinai, and they relied on the knowledge of their times. And if it turns out that we find out they were wrong about something in these areas that are not that were not their expertise, that's not an insult to them. They relied on science just like we do, and just like stuff that we think is true today based on our scientists, 100 years from now is going to look like we were primitive. Okay, so it's not an insult to them or to us. So what interested me about dreams, so last week we talked about medical practices that Chazal said that that they thought were, certain things they thought were dangerous and we now know are not. Dreams is a little bit of an interesting category, right? What makes dreams a bigger question mark than, let's say, like stepping on fingernails? What would you say? I know that's kind of a big question. Yeah.
I think it seems to have like psychological implications, which could be relevant to Torah.
Okay. So number one, in terms of the application, dreams can have psychological relevance that could be relevant to implementing Torah. Okay. What else?
It's also just so subjective. Like there's so many ways that they can be interpreted, and like how legit the science is on it. I don't know.
Okay, so that's another thing
all
also
you can say on it.
Right. So science itself is again, this, even though I'm not going to do a comprehensive survey, scientists nowadays don't know what dreams are, and since the time of I don't know when the first. I mean, I'm sure Socrates talks about dreams. Aristotle talks about dreams. Dreams have been studied and approached by many different people for a long time, and there's just lots and lots of different opinions. Yeah, Tamar.
Also, I guess a lot of nevuahs were through dreams.
That's the problem. Okay, the problem is that we know that the Torah holds that dreams are a vehicle of nevuah. Okay, and we know this because of this week's parsha of Vayeshev and next week's parsha Miketz. Those are the first, and really before that, but like specifically dreams and dream interpretation is bound up in the subject of nevuah. Yet we also know that dreams are a psychological phenomenon. So the question is like, what aspects of dream interpretation and Chazal's statements about dream interpretation are rooted in Masorah and knowledge of metaphysics and philosophy, and what aspects are contingent on like knowledge of medicine and modern psychology? It's a very gray area where there's a lot of stuff mixed in. And in fact, I actually started listening to, I intended to fully listen to a shiur that Rabbi Chait gave, I believe in 2005, on what the difference is between a prophetic dream and a regular dream and what the relationship is. Turns out that the shiur, I think it was actually several shiurim, is listed as 4.5 hours. And so I only got through like an hour of it. So there is that shiur if anyone is interested in it. But that's what intrigued me about this area of like, how do you navigate this area? And the interesting thing is there are certain topics in metaphysics that we actually don't have to navigate. For example, the Rambam deals with nevuah in many chapters in the Mor Nevuchim. Except for theoretical understanding, like nevuah is not going to really like show up in my everyday life, but we all have dreams, so like and that's kind of what makes this like a tantalizing area. Same thing with fingernails, right? Like the cutting your fingernails in order. We saw that there's an opinion that says like that you could just you don't have to keep that halacha. And so I can just go the rest of my life without thinking about that, if I really want to. But like, there are a bunch of aspects of the topic of dreams that like pull us in, whether from the parsha or from like, the statements of Chazal or of the halachic practices that we're going to look at. Okay, so that's what intrigued me about this topic. Okay, so let's look at the thing that I told Esty seems crazy. Okay, so there is a procedure. I don't know how many of you have heard of it, called Hatavas Chalom, which literally means the making good of a dream. Okay, I would translate it as like the good interpretation of a dream. You'll find this in the back of many sidurim. Okay, so I knew about the existence of this thing, but I hadn't actually read it in a very long time. So let's just take a look at it. We're not going to read through all the text. It says like this. This is from the Art Scroll, page 420 in the All Hebrew Siddur. Hacholim Chalom, someone who dreams a dream, v'nafsho aguma, and his soul is anguished. Yetivenu bifnei gimel chaverim ha'ohavim oso. He should have it interpreted for good in front of 3 friends who love him. Okay, and then here's the script. Hachaverim omrim, the friends say, Halo lelokim pisronim sapru na'ali. Don't interpretations belong to God? Please tell them to me. Okay, and that is a quote from this week's parsha in when Yosef is interpreting the dreams of the Sar HaMashkim and the Sar HaOfim. Okay, then Hacholim Omer. So that's what the friends say to him. Okay. Hacholim Omer Shiva Pamim. So the dreamer says to them 7 times, Chalma Tava Chazai. Okay. Chalma Tava Chazai. I dreamed a good dream. Okay. 7. He says that 7 times. Okay. So that's already weird. It's weird if you picture him saying it in a cult-like term, like Chalma Tava Chazai, in a chant.
I'm sorry, what is the circumstance where he says this?
When he has a dream and his soul is anguished. And then he gets 3 friends who love him, and they sit down, and the friends say, Halal Elokim Pisronim, Sapr Nali, and then he says, I dreamed a good dream. Okay,
so it wasn't a good dream. He didn't dream a good dream.
Correct.
Okay, I was just confused.
Correct. Yeah. Correct. Okay, so then they say, Hachaverim Onim Shivapami, they answer him 7 times. Chama Tava Chazes, you saw a good dream. Tavahu v'tava leheve. It is good and it should be good. Rachamana l'shavye l'tav. God should make it good. Shva zimnin ligzru ale min shmaya di leheve tava. 7 times it should be decreed upon you from heaven that it should be good. V'yeheve tava, and it should be good. Tavahu v'tava leheve. It is good and it should be good. Okay, then they say a bunch of psukim. So the heading here, psukim shel hafok tzara, psukim of reversing a misfortune. So hacholim omer, the dreamer says, hafachta mispedi lamacholi. My mourning has been transformed into dancing for me. Pitachta saki, open my sackcloth, vata'azrini simcha, and gird me with simcha. Okay, and then the chaverim say 3 psukim that all are about transforming bad things into good things. So, for example, az tismach besula b'machol, then the young maiden will rejoice with dancing, ubachurim uzkim yachtav, and the youths and the old elders together, v'hafachta evlam lasason, and their mourning will transform into joy. V'nichamtim v'simachtim miyagonam, and I will comfort them and make them rejoice from their distress. Okay, then it goes on. Okay, more psukim, then psukim shel pidyon, psukim of redemption, and then psukim shel shalom. Okay, and then they say a bunch of other stuff as well. Okay, so as you see what I mean, if you read this, you'd be like, this sounds crazy. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, it's not very
okay, right.
Thing, and what does that say?
Yeah, so the thing is I mentioned last time that just because something looks crazy doesn't mean that it is baseless. I always saw this in the back of the siddur, and I assumed it was some sort of like mystical ritual that was developed in the 1600s. Turns out it's based in the Gemara, okay, and it's brought down the halacha. So let me show you first the halacha. There are actually 2 institutions that I want to talk about today. One is Hatavas Chalom, which is what we just read, the dream interpretation. And the other one is Taanis Chalom, which is a fasting for a bad dream. Okay, so both halachos are brought down in the shulchan Aruch Chaim Siman Reish Chaf. And there's only 2 halachos here. First halacha, Haroe Chalom v'nafsha oguma, someone who sees a dream and his soul is anguished. Yetivenu ba'ape tlasa derachame. He should have it interpreted for the good in front of 3 people who love him. People who are who love him. Okay, v'lema ba'apaihu, and he should say in front of them, Chama tava chazai, v'lemru inhu tavahu v'tavadilhave v'chule. So the Shulchan Aruch is assuming that you have access to this text. Okay, so he says you should go through the whole thing, and that's the halacha, right? You just see a dream and your soul is anguished, then you should go through this procedure. That's it. Okay. Then the second halacha, which we're going to analyze in the second part of this year. Yafa Taanis Chalom Ra. A fast is good to negate a bad dream, Ke'esh Oras, like fire to chaff. Okay, that just like fire like burns up chaff really, really, brightly and quickly, and then it's gone. So too, that's what fasting does to a bad dream. And then the Ramah says, V'davka bobayom. That's specifically if you fast on the day you have the bad dream. V'afilu b'Shabbos, and even on Shabbos. Okay, which is a big deal, which we're going to also get into, which is that ordinarily it's usher to fast on Shabbos. The only time we fast on Shabbos is Yom HaKippurim, that falls out on Shabbos. If Tisha B'Av falls out on Shabbos, we don't fast on it. Yet, you can do this Taanis Chalom, this fast on a dream on Shabbos. Okay, so very, very strange here. Okay, which shows again that this is a real thing, that it overrides this Isser of fasting on Shabbos. Or maybe we're going to see maybe it doesn't override it, but the point is that you can fast on Shabbos. Okay, now I brought down the Mishnah Berurah here just in case we have any practical questions. Okay, but let's look at the Gemaras that this stems from. And by the way, you can interrupt me at any time to ask questions, but because this is not a comprehensive overview of everything, then it's possible I haven't researched certain things. The structure of the shiur is going to look like this: is we're going to just read through how the Aruch HaShulchan treats these 2 institutions and how the Rambam treats them. And we're just going to read through. I'm not going to read everything, but we're going to use this as like a platform for discussion, okay, and talk about the implications here. Okay, so this is going to be kind of like we're on a program. Again, I apologize to those who are used to my ordinary shiurim. We're like, we set out and we have questions and we have a problem. We try to figure it out on our own. Like last week, this is not one of those shiurim. Okay, so but don't let that discourage you from participating. Okay, so there are a bunch of Gemaras in the 9th chapter of Brachos about dreams. That's where most of the Gemaras about dreams are found. Some of them are halachic, some of them are Aggadic. I want to read 2 of them. Okay, first one is the source of this practice here, which is in Brachos Daf Nun Hey Amud Beis. Amar. Oh, and by the way, Freud in his book Interpretation of Dreams, I don't remember how much he quotes this, but I know that he read the Talmud when he was researching dreams, because he figured that there's probably a lot of wisdom about, in the Talmudic sages about this. Okay. Amar Rav Huna bar Ami, Amar Rav Padas, Amar Rav Yochanan. Haroach Chalom v'nafsho aguma. Someone who sees a dream and his soul is anguish. Yelech l'vyifterena b'fnei shlosha. You should go and interpret it, have it interpreted in front of 3. Okay. Then the Gemara says, Yiftereno, have it interpreted. Amar Rav Chisda, Chama delo mafasher igarta delo mikaria. So this is another interesting quote. Rav Chisda says, a dream that is not interpreted is like a letter that is not read. Okay, and actually I forgot to quote the Rashi here. Let me just go to the Rashi. I think Rashi says, I know this because the Aruch Shulchan mentions it later on. Hold on just one second here. Sorry about that. What would you say it means that a letter that is a dream that is not interpreted is like a letter that's not read?
Every dream is a message.
Okay, so every dream has a message. That's definitely true. Okay, that's one thing you definitely see from there.
It's a waste to not interpret a dream because you're missing an important piece of information.
So it's interesting. If you just saw that, statement in isolation, you would think that it's encouraging you to interpret dreams. Okay, the Gemara seems to be saying that this is a reason to not interpret the dream, because it's saying, because whoever this first person is, Rabbi Yochanan says you should have it interpreted, and the Gemara says have it interpreted, but Rav Chisda says that a dream that is not interpreted is like a letter that's not read. Okay, so I thought there was a Rashi here. It's possible that this Gemara is quoted elsewhere and there's a Rashi there. Okay, I'm just going to skip ahead for 1 second to the Aruch Shulchan because he does quote the Rashi. Hirsch Rashi, Chalam shelo yiftruhu ki igeres shelo yikruhu lo tov v'lo ra. Okay, so it's not good or bad. Okay, in other words, you don't know if it's good or bad. So the Gemara, I guess, is astonished and saying like this might turn out to be bad if you get it interpreted. Maybe you shouldn't get it interpreted. So the Gemara says, Ela ima yativena bifnei shlosha. So the Gemara modifies it and says, don't just have it interpreted, have it interpreted for the good in front of 3 people. Okay, then it says the procedure, Laise tlasav lemu lahu chalma tava chazai. Bring 3 people and say in front of them, I dreamed a good dream. And they should say to him, Tavahu v'tav lehave, Rahmana l'shavi l'tav, Shva zimnim ligzru alach min shmai l'lehavitava v'havitava. So it's a condensed form of what we read in the Siddur. It is good and it should be good. God should make it good. 7 times it should be decreed upon you from heaven that it should be good, and it will be good. V'lemu shalosh hafuchos, and then they should say 3 reversals, v'shalosh peduyos, and 3 redemptions, v'shalosh shlomos, and that's what we saw in the Siddur. They should say 3 psukim of reversing sadness to gladness, 3 psukim of redemption, and 3 psukim of peace. Okay, so that would indicate, if you just read this, like you would think that it means, you could think that it means that like they have to interpret it for good, because maybe it indicates something bad, but then it leads you to ask these questions like, well, if the dream is like a bad omen, so then how does them interpreting it make it good? Like, what's up with that? Like, for example, if you look at this week's Parsha, Yosef interprets the dream of the Sar HaMashkim in a good way and says that Paro will take you out of jail and restore you to your post. And then the Sar HaOfim, he says that Paro is going to kill you. And it seems like the dream was a prophecy, which Yosef doesn't say, oh, if you want, I can interpret it for good and then make it good, right? It sounds like it's just like, it's going to happen, And same thing with the, dreams in Daniel, where there's a lot of parallels between Daniel and Yosef, but, Nebuchadnezzar has dreams that Daniel interprets, and they're prophetic, and Nebuchadnezzar tries to thwart the dreams, but they come true anyway, So it's like, what are these? Are these prophecies? You have all these other statements of Chazal, like a dream is the 60th of prophecy, and so like it's a lot of confusing statements. Again, we're only focusing on the ones related to the halacha here. So the second Gemara is even funnier. Okay, like laugh out loud funny, I think. Okay, Shmuel
Wait,
Kihava.
I have a question.
Sure.
I'm sorry. Just
No,
about the idea of it being like a letter that's not read. Is that saying that you said it was not good or not bad? Is that saying like, in other words, just like a letter that's not read, you don't know whether or not it's good for the bad?
Okay.
I just didn't understand the statement.
Yeah. So when we look at the Aruch Shulchan, he's going to take a stance on that. Okay. I would have taken the Gemara to mean that it might be good or bad, and you don't know it until you open it, right? But then you have this question, which is then how can interpreting it for the good, like if I have a letter that's bad, let's say it says you're getting sued for $1 million or whatever, and the government's going to seize your house. I don't know, whatever it is. I can have my friends interpret it as good as they want, but it's not going to change what the letter says, So but the Gemara is comparing this procedure of dream interpretation to that, as if the friends interpreting it can make it good. So the question is, how does the analogy work? If it's a letter, that means the contents are there, you just don't know what they are. But if it's somewhat contingent on interpretation, then it seems like the contents are not fixed. So I think right now it's natural for us to have that question. So I'm not.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Why is this a reason to maybe not interpret it? Doesn't it mean that it's giving you some sort of information? If something bad is going to happen and you get a letter about it, and then you don't open it, it doesn't change the thing whether or not things going to happen.
That's why that's another question mark here, because the Gemara seems to be saying that interpreting is going to be somehow opening Pandora's box in a bad way. And then the Gemara continues with that premise and says, okay, therefore interpret it for good, So again, it does not seem like the letter analogy holds up the way that the Gemara is treating it, which must mean that we're misunderstanding the letter analogy. Okay, so let's see. I think it'll become clear as we go through the sources. Okay, one more Gemara, same daf, same amud. Shmuel ki hava chaze chama bisha amar. So when Shmuel would see a bad dream, he would say a pasuk from Zechariah, which means v'chalomus hashav yidaberu. They will speak dreams of falsehood. Okay, ki hava chaze chama tava. But when he saw a good dream, Amar, he would say, V'chi hachalomus hashav yidaberu. He would change the pasuk into a rhetorical question, saying, do they show you dreams of falsehood? V'haksiv b'chalom adaber bo. It is written in this is in the speech of Hashem to Miriam and Aaron, talking about Moshe's prophecy and the other prophet's prophecy. B'chalom adaber bo. God says, I speak to prophets in dreams. Okay, so it sounds very convenient that when he has a bad dream, he says, it's false. And when he has a good dream, then it says, then it sounds like he's saying that it's God speaking, right? So which one is it? So Rava brings up this contradiction. Okay, he says, Rava made a contradiction, pointed out the contradiction in these two pasukim. Ksiv b'chalom adaber bo. It is written in one pasuk, I speak to them in a dream. I speak to him in a dream. That's implying that it's real content, that it has significance from God. Uksiv v'chalamos hashav yidaberu. But then the pasuk in Zechariah says that they speak with false dreams. So which one is it? Lo kasha, not a difficulty, not a contradiction. Kan alidei malach, kan alidei shade. That the pasuk that says I will speak to him in a dream, that's talking about a dream that is through a malach. But when it says that they have dreams of falsehood, that's through a demon. Okay, that answers it. Okay, done with the shiur now. All right, so this even adds more questions. So what does it mean a dream through a malach versus a dream through a demon? Okay. So again, imagine that we did this with dozens more Gemaras. Okay, which the Aruch Shulchan is going to go through, and we have all these questions about dreams. Now the Aruch Shulchan comes on the scene and he says, okay, my job is to paskin. Let me tell you what to do practically. Okay, so the Aruch Shulchan is not a book of philosophy or psychology. He's telling you practical halacha. Okay, so let's let us ourselves be guided through his treatment of dreams. Now, the actual thing is 8 halachos, but we're only going to read through 6 of them, or not even 6 of them in entirety. Okay, but I want you to just see how I want you to pay attention to 2 things as we read this. One is the content, the other is the tone. Okay, so he says like this: B'inyan hachalomos rabu hadavarim. Regarding dreams, there are many statements. V'yesh mi rabbeinu zal sheyatzu levli l'saper hachalom hara v'lo yifratrenu v'az ein bo mamish. There are some rabbis who advise you to not tell your bad dreams, and to not interpret them, and then there will be no substance in the dreams. Okay, in other words, you have a bad dream, don't talk about it, and there's no power in the dream. The dream will come to nothing. Okay. V'kach amru b'perek haroa, and this is what it says in the Gemara. Chama delom mifshar ki igrata delom mikriya. A dream that is not interpreted is like a letter that is not read, and he quotes this Rashi, which doesn't appear in our Gemara. Chalom shelo yifatruhu ki ger shelo kra'uhu. A dream that is not interpreted is like a letter that's not read. Lo tov lo ra. It's neither good nor bad. And Rashi adds an important point. Shekol ha'chalomos holching achar ha'peh. All dreams go based on the mouth, which means that the way you interpret it will determine how it is. Okay. Now, I don't know how that squares up with the language of it's like a letter that's not read, because a letter that's not read does not go after the interpretation. Okay, but that's how Rashi takes it. They learn it out from in next week's parsha. Okay, that it says, hold on, when Paro has his dreams. I keep on doing that. Paro has his dreams, and wait for it, 41. And the Sarah Mashkim says, Kain Haya, Vaihi, misclicking. Hold on. It says, Visham itanu nar ivri eved lasar hatabachim. There was a young Hebrew youth who was a servant to the chief butcher. And we told him our dreams, and he interpreted for us our dreams, each man in accordance with his dream. And it was as he interpreted it, that's what it was. So the Aruch Shulchan is saying basically that the dream will be however you interpret it. Okay. In other words, I think it's tempting to read that pasuk that his interpretations came true, meaning he interpreted it correctly. This is saying that no, based on how he interpreted it, that's how it turned out. Like his interpretation was the cause of it turning out this way. Okay, that's how the Aruch Shulchan is.
Question?
Yeah.
Are we assuming that Yosef was interpreting prophetic dreams in this discussion?
In this discussion, it sounds like not, right? It sounds like he's reading it as these were regular dreams, and based on the way Yosef interpreted it, that was like a self-fulfilling dream prophecy. In other words, it made it come true in that way. But again, the actual topic of Yosef and his dreams is one that we're not going to touch.
Okay, so we're not getting into whether or not this was actually
correct.
A dream interpretation.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, so then the Aruch Shulchan goes on and he says, "Va'amru sham." It says there. So he quotes the contradiction that Rava pointed out. Rava Rami Ksiv b'chalam adaberbo uksiv b'chalamos hashav yidaberu lokasha kan aide malach kan aide shade. So it says that when the pasuk says God speaks to him in dreams, that's talking about dreaming through a malach. When it says that they speak falsehood, that's through a demon. Now the Aruch Shulchan is going to explain what this is. Kolomar ha'ish asher hu tahor u'machshavosav b'torah v'yira. A person who is pure, and their thoughts are in Torah and fear of God. V'yashen, and he goes to sleep. Shelo b'milui keres, not with a full stomach. Okay, hachalom shel ish kazeh vada yesh bo mamash. The dreams of such a person definitely have substance, meaning there's definitely meaning in those dreams. Shemarin lo min hashamayim aide hamalachim hashomrim es ha'adam hashalim. That he has shown things from heaven through the angels that guard a perfected person. Kidichsiv ki malacha v'itzavelach. It says, for his angels will command you. Aval, okay, we'll all summarize afterwards. Aval ha'anashim ha'pshutim, but simple people, okay, meaning ordinary people, ha'meshukayim b'havle ha'olam, who are immersed in the nonsense of the world. Shehim ha'shedim ha'gumurim, so the nonsense, the hevel of the world, those are the real demons. Hashodedim hatzlachas adam ha'amitis, which destroy a person's true success, which means that they interfere with your perfection. Okay, so there he's saying these are not demons, creatures, or mystical demons. He's saying demons is a mashal for the things in the world, the bad values in the world that occupy you and take you away from your true perfection. V'habruim hashedim asuim lakach, and these demons are created for that reason. Okay, lahazik v'lishdod ha'atzlach ha'amitis. Meaning that's what they do. They damage you and they interfere with your true perfection. Shav yadabiru ha'chalam oseim. Their dreams are false. Ve'ein bahem mamash, and there's no substance in their dreams. I'm going to finish to get to the end of the paragraph and I'll summarize. All the more so people who eat a lot before they go to sleep. Because the fumes that arise in your midst, in your innards, like the digestive juices or whatever, go up and they mess up your imagination. There's no truth in them at all. Same thing if you dream about things that happen during the day. Pshita, it's obvious. It's obvious that your imaginative faculty is showing you things that are just in line with your thoughts. Anything like this, there is no substance in those dreams. Ushmuel and Shmuel ki havachaze chal matava, when he saw a good dream, hay omer, he would say, he would say, do dreams have falsehood? Isn't it written that God speaks to you in dreams? It would say that dreams speak in falsehood. It says in general, if you are a good person, then you will be shown good dreams, but when you get up, you'll forget about it. Okay, so what's the overarching message that you think the Aruch HaShulchan is trying to convey here? If you had to summarize, like, not the particulars, but just the general message he wants his readers to get about dreams. Yeah, Tamar?
Well, there's two kinds.
Good, there's two kinds of dreams, okay? And what determines whether you get each kind of dream?
Your level of perfection.
Your level of perfection. Okay, so he's saying that if you are a perfected person and you're always thinking about Torah and your thoughts are not influenced by like the surrounding things, so then it is possible that you will have dreams that have significant content. But if you are bad and you're influenced by the society around you, that could influence your dreams. If you eat foods before you go to sleep, there could be physiological causes to interfering with your dreams. You know, if you have thoughts and you're preoccupied, then that's going to have that's going to have influence on your dreams. And he says that what is the part of the person that causes you to have dreams? It's the imaginative faculty. And without going into a whole discourse on the imaginative faculty, one of the hallmarks, one of the nature of the imaginative faculty is defined by the Rambam as the part of you that takes impressions that you see through your senses and can manipulate them and distort them either based on your mind or based on your desires. Okay, so the imaginative, and that's the cause of your dreams. And the imaginative faculty is very active, even when you're asleep. And the only difference between when you're asleep and you're awake is when you're asleep, you can't exert conscious control over it. Okay, and therefore it's going to be subject to whatever forces are active, whether they're from your body or from your emotions. And that's why you need to be in a high level of perfection in order for your dreams to, for you to be able to say about your dreams that they come from your mind and are not influenced by your emotions or your physiology. And that's what, again, without going into a whole thing about nevuah, that's why nevuah occurs in a dream and why when you're asleep or when you're in a trance, because in order for a nevuah to occur, I'm going to give a very crude description. Your imaginative faculty has to have what the Rabbah calls hisbodedus. It has to be isolated from any influence from your senses or from your body or from your emotions. So that's why Nevi'im have to be very perfected in terms of their personality and their psyche, and they have to go into a trance in order for their imaginative faculty to be purely responding to their mind. And then that's what allows you to tap into nevuah. He's not saying that this is nevuah, but he's saying that there is a phenomenon of malachim, whatever those are, whether those are natural forces or hashgacha, that like a perfected person could be shown something in a dream that actually is coming from a source that is rooted in reality that can be of benefit to him. Okay. Yes, Ayala.
Okay, what was our definition of good dream and bad dream based off of the Gemaras, and has that changed after reading this?
Good question. So the Gemaras only said the term bad dream and just bad dream and nafsho aguma, the soul is anguished. So it seems to be defining good and bad dream based on the emotional reaction to it, you know, or maybe the imagery in the dream is like of something bad happening, but we weren't given specific definitions. Okay, but the nafsho aguma definitely is about something that has bad emotional content, like you feel anguished about it. Okay.
And is the Aruch Shulchan continuing that, or is he saying that it's a different thing? It's based off of your level, which would make it good or bad.
So I think he is continuing. My impression is he's taking the statements of good dream and bad dream and saying that. Actually, I don't know. I was going to say that he's taking the statements about good and bad dream and treating them as, a dream that makes you feel bad or shows you a bad image, and then saying that that's the cause of it is determined by whether you're perfected or not. But then at the end, when he says that in general, a good person is only shown good things, I don't know if that means that they only have pleasant dreams or if that means that they are shown dreams that have benefit in them. I'm not sure. Okay. So then he spends the next couple of things, which we're not going to go through, quoting a lot of statements of Chazal, and about what they say about dreams. Okay, and they're very fun to read through, but we just don't have time. For example, I really like this. Here's examples. Haroi David B'Chalom, O Sefer Tehillim, O Shir HaShirim, Yitzab L'Chasidus. If you see in David HaMelech or Sefer Tehillim or Shir HaShirim in a dream, you should look forward to being a Chassid. Okay, to like a piety. Haroi Sefer Malachim, Yitzabed L'Gdula. If you see Sefer Malachim, then you should look forward to some sort of like promotion. Haroi Shlomo or Yechezkel or Sefer Mishlei, Yitzabed L'Chachma. V'chein Sefer Koheles. Okay, I dream about Mishlei all the time. If you see Mishlei or Shlomo or Yechezkel or Koheles in a dream, you should look forward to Chachma. Haroi Megillas Esther Nes Naselo. Okay, so it goes through all these things. Okay, and he gives a bunch more about good and bad dreams, about dreaming about wine and all this other stuff. But then he says at the end, he reinforces, he says, all dreams go after based on the interpretation, therefore you should interpret it for good, which again throws into question, what does he hold about all these statements in Chazal? Is he saying that if you see this dream, then that's definitely going to happen? Or is he saying if you see this dream, you should interpret it in this way, and then the interpretation will make it happen? Okay, I'm inclined to think the latter. Okay. Now he finally gets to the halachic procedure, and he says like this: V'amru Chazal bebrachos sham haroeh chalom v'nafsho aguma alav yetivenu b'fnei shlosha ohavim v'yomru b'fneihem chalma tava chazai. Okay, so you should say if you see a dream and your soul is anguish, you should have it interpreted for the good in front of three beloved ones, and say, "I've seen a good dream." Okay, now when you have this thing of like saying something in front of three people, what do you associate to? Based in, right? Based in is three. We saw that in Pirkei Avos here, right? But the weird thing is, what's this idea of three people who love you? Okay, that's very, very strange. Okay, so we'll have that as a question. So then it says, so you say, I dreamed a good dream. Klomar, di yoser tov sheyargil ha'adam es atzmo livli lahabit el ha'chalomus ki rubam ein behem mamash. So this is a statement he adds here. He says, it is better for a person to not accustom himself, okay, to look at dreams, because the majority of them have no substance. Kidichsiv b'Koheles, as is written in Koheles, ki ba hachalom barov inyan, that dreams come about through an abundance of anxiety. Upirish Rashi, ki derech hachalom lavo barov hirhurim shema'ayin umharhim bayom, that Rashi says that dreams come about through all of the anxiety and all the thoughts that you think about during the day. V'nemar, and it says ki barov chalamos v'havalim udvarim harbeh ki es elokim yirah. It says, in an abundance of dreams and nonsense and many statements, fear God. V'hishveh chalomos lahavalim, and it's equating dreams to nonsense. Okay, the ikar hakol, and the essence of everything is liro mipnei elokim, is to fear God. V'az lo yira mipnei chalom, then you will not be afraid of a dream. Okay, so he's really like laying out all of these like things here. He's basically saying, okay, don't do this. Don't accustom yourself to caring about dreams. Most dreams are nonsense. Just fear God. You don't have to worry about dreams. And then he says, Amnam, however, im nafsho aguma alav, if your soul is anguished, sheyesh lo agmas nefesh mechalom v'doeg alav, that you have anguish of your soul and you're worried about it, hasegula lezeh shegima ovim yifatrein latov, then the remedy is for three people to interpret for the good. Sorry, I misinterpreted something earlier. Here's what he's saying. He's saying that when Chazal say, Haroeh chalom v'nafsho aguma alav, he's saying, yeah, Chazal say you should only do a procedure like this if you are anguished, but all the other dreams you have, you should just ignore. Okay, in other words, he's saying from Chazal themselves, you see, they did, Chazal could have advised you to go through a procedure like this for every dream that you have, but they didn't. They only said only do this if it's a dire situation where you have anxiety from your dream, then you should do this. Okay, so that's right away like narrowing the scope. Okay. So then he goes on and he says, what should he do? He says, "V'ulai mipnei zeh haminhag b'harbi makomos shemi shechalom lo chalom lo tov yavo lifnei rav ha'ir levakesh livtor es hachalom." So he says maybe for this reason the practice is in many places that if you have a dream, you should go that's not good. You should go to the rav of the city and have him interpret it. Harav mamsi lo pisron tova, and the rav of the city will be able to produce a good interpretation. Inyan dine mamanos yachid mumched dino kigimo hediotos. That when it comes to monetary laws, a beis din of 3 people is equal to 1 expert. So in other words, he's saying the rav of the city can substitute for a beis din. Umistama harav hu ohev l'chol ha'ir. And in general, the rav of the city is going to love all the people. And the rav will interpret it for good. So I guess this was a common thing back then, that people, instead of gathering a beis din of 3 friends, they would have the rav do this. And he's saying because the rav can substitute. Okay. Okay, so then he goes through the whole procedure and says what it is. And it's very funny. He does call it a lachash. And he says the reason why you interpret it 3 times is he says, you should say it 3 times, just like all incantations. Okay. And then he goes through all the psukim, etc., etc. And then he says at the end, one more time, he says, he says some people say this phrase, Ribono shel olam, ani shalach v'chalom shalach. Some people say this little paragraph during Birkas Kohanim, which I don't know if you've seen that in the Siddur. There's another thing, and then he summarizes at the end once more. Davar lo yargil adam b'ke'ela. A person should not accustom himself to this. V'tov lifnei Elokim yimalei mimenu. Someone who is good before God, like if you're actually a good person, you should try to like escape from doing this. You should think about the dream when they're interpreting it for you. Okay, so what does it sound like, the way that he's interpreting all this? What does it sound like the purpose of this dream interpretation procedure is, and what is it not? I know we didn't read everything, but I tried to select the parts that give you a flavor. Yeah, Ayala?
It sounds like it's kind of just to make you feel better and not actually
Right.
anything substantive.
Exactly, right? It sounds like what he's saying is really, unless you're a perfected person, then dreams don't have any real substance. And the only thing is people have all these heebie-jeebie feelings about their dreams. And if you can't shake the feeling, this is what you should do to alleviate that concern. And it seems like that's why it should be 3 friends. It's why there's a ritual, it's why they read psukim about God transforming things to the good, and why they make all these reassuring statements. This seems like an elaborate, placebo type ritual that is designed to take a psychological phenomenon and that is negative and that could have detrimental effects and just like push it in a good direction. Okay, it does not seem like he holds that this actually transforms your fate and destiny, and he's actively discouraging you from partaking in such a ritual. Okay, so I find that very interesting. That people will have these feelings, and guess what's going to happen? What do you think is going to happen if halacha doesn't give people an outlet for dealing with their dreams through something like this?
Avodah Zarah.
Avodah Zarah, right? This is going to have some form of superstitious Avodah Zarah thing. So what we do is we frame it in terms of God, in terms of God saving you from stuff, and like that ends up being a beneficial thing. Okay, yeah, Ayala.
About what the Aruch HaShulchan says in, I think maybe it was the first paragraph where he talks about how like your dreams come from your desires and that psychological thing. Yeah, I would think that would kind of be like a practical, like cool thing that you could learn about yourself.
Okay, so that's where where we're going next. Okay, so
Wait, before we go on, I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're saying that this is really a halachic institution. I don't know what you want to call it.
Yeah.
I don't mean institution specifically, but like a halachic procedure, because dreams affect people, and if they don't have something to do, then they might go towards Avodah Zarah. So this is something that's set up to help people when they've got this disturbed energy, that they have some way to channel it and focus on true things and and some kind of activity.
And I would add to that this might be why Chazal made so many statements about dreams, because the goal is to the Jew is going to have a feeling that dreams have significance, because there are so many dreams in Tanakh that are significant because they're prophetic. But dreams are also something that people are pulled by superstitious and occult feelings about. And so Chazal are trying to like frame this in a Torah way and have, it's funny, they're making it in an institution where you can basically like have closure from a bad dream and just move past it in a way that is consistent with Torah ideas and just like takes you away from that avodah zarah impulse. That's my my understanding.
Okay, and then altogether, there really are two different phenomena that both get expressed through dreams, and because we can't distinguish which is which, this is a way to help us just move on.
Let me think about it for 1 second. See, I don't think he would say that. I don't think the Aruch Shulchan would say that because we can't determine which is which. I think he'd say that he wants you to know that you should determine which is which. And you should know if you're a person who is a perfected person whose thoughts are always in Torah and Yira, and whether you're not. And I think he's expecting most of his readers to not be those people. But he's saying if you still have these bad dreams and it has anxiety, and you know that these dreams are coming from bad places, this is what you should do. Like, in other words,
so there do exist two types.
Right, there do exist, and the procedure is not helping you to sort out which one's which. It's after, it comes after you make that distinction. You know, you still can't like shake the dream.
You can't shake it. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so now let's go with Ayala's question, which is, it seems like if these dreams are coming from your imagination or your psyche, then this could be used for your advantage. Okay, so here we're going to go into a little bit of Freud. Okay, but it's not ordinary Freud. It is Learified Freud. Okay, so I have, let me just stop screen sharing so I can show you. So those of you who were here in the first shiur of the season that I gave, it was on my trip to the Crow from the Jonathan Lear's book, Radical Hope, Ethics in the Face of Cultural Devastation. Jonathan Lear is a thinker whose primary interest is in Aristotle and Freud. Okay, and he wrote another book called, appropriately enough, Freud. Okay, and what this book is a very interesting book. I haven't read it in a long time, but he basically goes through an overview of Freud's life and his theories, but then conducts a Freudian analysis of Freud's life and theories. Okay, based on Freud's you know, his own writings and stuff like that. So, for example, like just as an example of the type of thing that he does is, you know, Freud will have made certain like moves in his career or in his theory that seem like symptoms. And he actually has this great sentence in the chapter that I'm going to read from, but I just want to read this. He says that Freud had one big disadvantage that no one else in history had, is that Freud did not have another psychoanalyst, right? That he could talk to, you know? So he did his own self-analysis, but like there's certain inherent barriers in self-analysis. So I want to read you two excerpts from these two books. Okay, the first one is just a very conveniently at the end of each chapter he has a summary of all the contents of the chapter. So Lear says like this. This is on page 115 to 116. Okay, this chapter gives an account of Freud's principles of dream interpretation. If one takes these principles seriously, it emerges that the interpretation of dreams is an ethical activity, in the sense that it is essentially embedded in a person's engaged attempt to answer the question of how to live. Okay, so the definition of ethics, the way he says it, is basically the study of how to live a good life. Okay, but then he says this is a conclusion Freud points to, but does not explicitly draw himself. In other words, Freud does not, like, all the groundwork is laid for the implication that you can use dreams, like Ayala said, as like for your perfection, but Freud does not take it in that direction. He takes it in the psychoanalytic direction of improving your life through like undoing your neuroses. Okay, he says, Freudian dream interpretation is context dependent. To understand a dream, one must look to the life circumstances of the dreamer. A dream with identical content will mean something different for people who are living different lives. The interpretation is also holistic. For any given image in the dream, one must look to its place in the entire dream to grasp what it means. Thus, dream interpretation cannot consist in a decoding of symbols one by one. Moreover, Freud insists that the formation of symbols in a dream will typically be highly idiosyncratic and contingent. Okay, thus it is against the basic spirit of Freudian dream interpretation to think of there being typical symbols in dreams. So like there were other dream interpreters like Jung, I think, who did say that there's such a thing as like universal symbols in dreams. And like what we saw in the Aruch Shulchan, it seems like Chazal thought that also, that if you see, Shlomo in a dream, that you can look forward to Chachma, if you, all this other stuff. So Freud was against that. And yet he says, that being said, Freud himself added a long chapter on typical symbols in later editions of the interpretation of dreams. Okay, which, by the way, a side point here, if you ever read through the interpretation of dreams, Lear advises to get an edition with all of his footnotes, because Lear says that Freud was constantly revising the book throughout his life, but he included all the revision notes in all the footnotes. And he says it's like reading a Talmud of dream interpretation, because it's commentary and meta commentary and all this stuff. So he says, though, that Freud added a long chapter on typical symbols in the later editions. By doing so, Freud obscured the central ideas of his own theory. More importantly, Freud insists that the ultimate arbiter of the meaning of a dream is the dreamer himself or herself. He also insists that the essence of a dream is not its hidden content, but the activity of dreaming, which he called the dream work. This presents a conception of dream interpretation very different from the familiar picture of an, oops, sorry, it was funny. I gotta tell you something funny after this. A familiar picture of an analyst telling the analysand of what his or her dreams mean. An example of Freud's self-interpretation is used to illustrate these points. Okay, side note. So I made this typo when I was typing this morning. I typed picture instead of picture. And those who have been following various groups of mine know that I've been obsessed with ChatGPT, with the artificial chatbot. So I typed in, I said, give a Freudian dream interpretation of a typo that I had in the sentence, blah, 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 where I typed picture instead of picture. And to its credit, it said, according to Freud's theory of dream interpretation, you cannot interpret a dream unless you know all of the context and thoughts of the thinker. And so I can't give it a Freudian dream interpretation of this. So I was like,
Wow.
yeah, yeah. So that was very good. Okay, so I mentioned that this is the only dream interpretation theory that I'm familiar with. And not only am I familiar with it, this is the only dream interpretation theory that I've used and have had success with. And that's a whole other shiur about like how to do this dream interpretation. And like, I have examples. I used to do this in high school when students would ask about dreams. I have a whole PowerPoint on this. Yeah, Tamar?
If you want to finish what you were saying first,
No, go ahead. I have another point.
In terms of the Chazal that says, like, if you see David, you should think this, and if you see dream about Koheles, you should think this. Like, you could argue that I would think you could argue that you don't have to say they were holding of universal symbols in like a psychological way. They could say about because the things are like related to the content,
Yeah.
Like Koheles and wisdom, it's not a big leap that might be related in a psychological way.
So I was thinking there are two ways to interpret Chazal as not saying that there's like a dream glossary. One is that that what you're saying, which is that in our culture, it is likely that there are certain associations to certain things that we all know and talk about, So like, they're just like listing, they are listing like statistically speaking, like, this is something that like might be true. Again, Freud would disagree with that because he could, let's say like I dream of Mishle. So that could be about Chachma, but it could be about my relationship with Rabbi Moskowitz. It could be about like someone who I know named Shlomo. Freud would say it's very idiosyncratic in that way. The other possibility is that, like I said before, they're just giving suggestions for how you can interpret these dreams for good. Yeah. Okay. Now, the reason why I wanted to read this is not because we're going to go into Freud, but because this piques my interest of dreams as an ethical activity. Of, is there a way to use dreams for your own perfection? Okay, and that's when I remembered that in the book about Pleniku, the chief of the crow, he has one more point about Freudian dream interpretation, which I want to read to you. And this is a slightly longer excerpt, but I want to tell you the context. The context is Pleniku was the last chief of the crow, and he sensed that the white man was going to be taking over and that his people's way of life was threatened. The crow tribe was threatened, and he had a dream that told him basically how he should like respond to that challenge. And in this chapter, then Jonathan Lear goes through 3 theories of dreams. One where you treat dreams as like actual messages from another world. One where like you treat it like psychologically, and one which I forgot what the third one was. And he wants to show you that you don't have to believe what the crow believed about dreams in order to make Pleniku's dream interpretation a rational activity. Okay, so that's the context, and we're going to read this. But again, I realize that you can't fully get this without the full thing, so I'm just going to try to pull out some points. Ironically, This is on page 115 and 116 of this book also. Okay. I don't know what to make of that. Okay. So he says, one objection that needs to be met right away, meaning one objection to this notion that Pleniku saved his people based on a dream, derives from the work of Freud. In the interpretation of dreams, Freud argues that dreams are disguised gratifications of unconscious wishes. On this view, all we can truly learn about from a dream is the nature of one's own wishful longings. And insofar as we think we are learning about some independent reality, we are collaborating in a process by which we keep the wishful nature of our dreams from conscious awareness. If this was all there was to be said for dreams, then we would have to judge Pleniku's commitment to his dreams as wish-fulfilling optimism rather than courage. For on this account, he would mistakenly be taking himself to be facing up to reality and thus failing the third criterion of the courageous person. Okay, Lear outlines the 5 criteria of courage based on Aristotle. So he says, rather than getting a real glimpse into the future, he would wishfully be gratifying his own longings. And if the dream were only a wish fulfillment, then sticking to it steadfastly through life, as though it were giving him real information about the world, would be a paradigm of what Freud calls turning away from reality. That is, instead of facing up to the challenges that the world presents, one stubbornly clings to a dreamlike fantasy as a way of wishfully avoiding these challenges. If, like Aristotle, we think of virtue as lying in a mean between excess and defect, this turning away from reality would be a serious defect when it came to courage. It would also fail the second criterion, that the courageous person aims for the fine. For even if it happened to lead to good consequences, there is nothing particularly noble in mistaking one's own wishes for a higher cause. Indeed, one way to read this Freudian objection is as giving us a psychological account of what mere optimism, the 5th criterion, consists in. If Pleniku is only sticking to his wishes, then his leadership, however beneficial, is merely confident, not courageous. So to summarize, he says, a Freudian might say, well, dreams are only wish fulfillment. So if Pleniku had a dream and that dream led him to a plan that he implemented for his people, that's just Pleniku acting out his wishes. And the fact that he stubbornly clung to this is really turning away from reality and like running in the direction of wish fulfillment. And it happened to work out, but we can't actually say that what Pleniku was doing was courageous or had anything to do with reality. That's the objection. Okay. Now here's his response. And the whole reason I'm reading this is because in his response, he's going to introduce a nuance in Freud's theory of dream interpretation that is going to be the basis for us looking at this whole procedure. Okay, he says, obviously, this Freudian line of objection needs to be resisted. And I think it can be in part by making use of other materials that Freud himself gave us. Freud eventually abandoned the idea that every dream was the gratification of a wish. In particular, he left open the possibility that a dream might be a manifestation and representation of anxiety. And anxiety can be a realistic response to the world. In this way, an anxiety dream can function as a signal of real danger. But as soon as one makes this admission, the categorical quality of the Freudian objection falls apart. For if a dream can be a response to reality, it is at least possible that certain uses of this imaginative capacity might help us to respond better to the world's challenges than we would be able to do without it. And if that is so, certain capacities of imagination might actually be constituents of a courageous soul. So in other words, the move here he's making is he's saying, if all dreams are just wish fulfillment, then dreams can't help equip you to correspond to face reality, except insofar as like understanding more about your own psyche. But if dreams are also produced by anxiety, which Freud himself acknowledged, and anxiety can be prompted by something in the external world, and dreams are your imaginative faculty grappling with how to deal with it. So then you can use dreams in the proper way. Or perhaps there is a way to use dreams to cope with reality in a healthy way that is going towards reality, not fleeing away from reality. Okay, one more paragraph. Furthermore, even if we grant that a certain dream has a wishful component, the existence of that component does not thereby rule it out as a manifestation of courage. By way of analogy, think of ordinary conscious action. We take such actions to be outcomes of beliefs and desires. The mere fact that certain desires are involved does not thereby render action unresponsive to reality. It may be that our desires help us focus our beliefs or shift them in imaginative ways, and thereby help us better to face the situation. As long as a dream can be an imaginative response to reality, there's going to be a question not just of whether wishes are expressed in it, but how they're expressed. Key line here, in particular, there is the possibility that our wishes could be integrated into an overall functioning of our imaginative capacity in such a way as to facilitate a creative and appropriate response to the world's challenges. We thus have room for the idea of imaginative excellence when it comes to ethical life. So to summarize here, there is room within Freudian dream interpretation to say that you can read the dreams not just as giving you data about your own wishes, but about what aspects of anxiety are lurking under the your conscious awareness, and then use that data and use the data of how your dreams are reacting to it to equip yourself to actually face reality in a mature, healthy, rational way. Okay, so the question though is, this compounds Ayala's question of, okay, so actually let's see if you can come up with a question. Given that this is true, what objection might Lear have to the halachic procedure of dream interpretation that we've seen? Yeah, Ayala?
It's the halacha interpretation that we've seen is kind of denying any like actual substance to our dreams, but Lear is saying that it actually does reflect in some way reality,
okay,
or
so
desires.
Okay, so that is number one, which is that it does seem to be the way we're learning it, that the dream interpretation procedure is like saying that this is not a substance and this is just like helping you to cope with your anxiety. I think there's something else though that Lear would say is like even detrimental about the halachic procedure. Yeah, Tamara?
I guess it depends a little bit on the, maybe it depends on the dream, but I guess like you're losing out on the ability to learn from the dream, I guess.
Exactly.
Is the main thing. Yeah.
Exactly. You're losing out by having this anxiety and going to your friends and having them just like interpret it for good and make yourself feel better. You're wasting this opportunity to learn from your anxiety in a way that can help you to live better. Okay. And that's what bothered me when I was going through the Aruch Shulchan. And again, I think I was bothered because of my knowledge of Freud, that anxiety is a good opportunity to do teshuvah, to like have self, introspection, to do teshuvah. And it seems like this whole procedure just plasters over all of that, and like makes everything like spritzes like perfume so that like you don't have to like think about like this thing, it makes everything all happy and smiles. Okay. So I was relieved to find that there is at least one person who does seem to take this approach to dreams, and that is the Rambam. Okay, and the Rambam, of course, does it without knowledge of Freudian dream interpretation, but you'll see what he does. So, first thing is that whole procedure of dream interpretation. It should not surprise you that the Rambam does not codify it as halacha at all. Okay, no mention of dream interpretation in halacha, which means that the Rambam held that either it was, like based on outdated science, or catered to like, maybe it was too much of a risk of catering to like avodah zarah stuff, but he just doesn't have it at all. Okay, but what he does have is the process of Taanis Chalom, of fasting for a dream. Okay, so I want to show you the Rambam, but first let me show you the two main Gemaras about fasting for a dream. One is in Taanis Yud Beis Amud Beis. Amar Rabba bar Machasya, Amar Rav Chama bar Guria, Amar Rav Yefes, Taanis Chalom Ke'esh Le'Na'oros. Okay, we read this in the Shulchan Aruch, that a fast is for a dream like fire is for chaff, meaning it just burns it up. Amar Rav Chisda ubo bayom. Rav Chisda says it has to be on that day. Amar Rav Yosef, and Rav Yosef says vafilu b'Shabbos, even on Shabbos. My takante lesev ta'anisa latanisa. What is its correction? Fast a fast to make a fast for your fast. Okay, that's a cryptic thing that the Rambam will explain. Okay, second Gemara. It says in Brachos, Amar Rabbi Elazar Mishum Rabbi Yossi ben Zimra, Kol HaYoshev B'Taanis B'Shabbos, Korin Lo Gazar Dino Shal Shivim Shana. Anyone who fasts like this on Shabbos, specifically on Shabbos, your decree of 70 years will be torn up. Okay, like a bad decree. The Afal Pichein, and even nevertheless, Chosrin V'Nifra'in Mimenu Din Onek Shabbos. You will get punished for Onek Shabbos. Okay. So what this means is, I mentioned before that even though you are allowed to do a fast on Shabbos, if you have a bad dream, then it still is usher to do, okay? And you're violating Onek Shabbos. So now the Gemara says, "My takante, what is the way to make up for the fact that you didn't keep Onek Shabbos?" Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak lesev tanisa latanisa. You should fast a fast for your fast. Okay, so basically what this means is like this: is if I fast on Shabbos for a dream, I am not fulfilling the mitzvah of Onek Shabbos, and to do teshuvah for that avera, I have to do another fast on another day. Okay, so you're gonna have to do two. Okay, so now let's look at how the Rambam codifies this. Okay, he says, "Haroeh chalom ra," someone who sees a bad dream, sarich lihisanus lamachar. He needs to fast the next day, meaning the morning of the dream. Kedei sheyashuv, so that he should do teshuvah, v'yeor l'ma'asav, and that he should be awakened to examine his actions, v'chapes ben, and to analyze his actions, v'yachzor b'teshuva. Okay, so he says straight out, bad dreams are a vehicle that you should use for tshuva. Okay. Umisane vafilu b'Shabbos, you should fast even on Shabbos. Mispalo anenu b'chol tefillah, you should daven anenu in every tefillah. That's the special paragraph that we say when we fast. Afal pishlo kibel alav mi od yom, even though you did not accept the fast upon yourself from the day before, because you only did it when you first woke up. V'misane b'Shabbos misane yom acher, and if you fast on Shabbos, you'll have to fast an additional day mipnei shebitel oneg Shabbos, because you negated oneg Shabbos. Okay, so I think this is, again, not specifically through Freud, but this is the Rambam's approach to bad dreams. Okay, is that, and in other words, presumably the Rambam would say that any bad dream that you have, then this could be a proper response to it. In fact, he doesn't say this can be, he says sarich, which I don't know exactly what that means. He doesn't say chayav, right? He doesn't say that you are obligated to. So this is still reshus, this is still optional, but sarich seems to imply like a certain like level of a mandate, like that you ought to do this, you know, and the purpose of it should be teshuva. So I think that the Rambam, perhaps this is why, and this is speculation on my part, perhaps this is why the Rambam did not want to bring down the halacha of the dream, the Hatavas Chalom ritual, because that discourages teshuva, right? It helps you to overcome your anxiety just by having your friends like say that everything's going to be okay. Rambam says no, lean into that anxiety and look into it and use it as a vehicle for tshuva. And I think the Rambam, if the Rambam held by Freud, the Rambam would say that Freudian dream analysis could be a very good way to uncover the anxieties and like to be able to face you know what you're dealing with here. I'm going to pause the recording for 1 second. So we just had an example of a dream, but this is what it means to that Lear said that dreams can be interpretation of dreams is an ethical activity in the sense that it is essentially embedded in a person's engaged attempt to answer the question of how to live. But it's only that if you make it that way. And I think that the procedure of Hatavas Chalom discourages that, you know, because you're wasting this opportunity and just making yourself feel better about it. Whereas the Rambam's approach is taking full advantage of that. Yeah, Tamar?
Could you argue that the case where the person is disturbed is where the person is not receptive to learning from the dream already? Like maybe this is set up for a person who's not on a level or not for whatever reason able to work with the dream.
Interesting. I mean, you could say that, but I doubt it, simply because the disturbance is often like facing the disturbance is the first step in like, you know.
Yeah,
like
I do hear that. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's no procedure that Chazal have. I mean, yeah, I would also be hesitant to like to say that that's what Chazal meant, you know, because I don't think they were aware of this type of thing. But I hear the approach. It's a valiant approach to try to save that. I want to read just 1 second here. Also, the Mishnah Brura. I saw this actually in Rashi, but I don't remember which Rashi. The Mishnah Brura points out that when you do a fast, a Taanis Chalom, he says, "Aval davka kashosa teshuva imo." He says specifically that that when you do teshuva with a fast, ki hatainis mo'il kamo korban l'chet. A tainis only helps you just like a korban for chet. Ma korban eno mo'il b'li teshuva. Just like a korban doesn't help you without tshuva. Shnemar zevach r'shaim toeva. It says the sacrifice of the wicked is an abomination. Af Taanis Chalom. So too with a fasting for a dream. So in other words, don't just fast and then not do tshuva. Fasting is only good insofar as it helps you to do tshuva. Side point before I forget, also, in my second year of yeshiva, then one of the guys had a nightmare and asked Rabbi Chait, how bad does a dream have to be for you to do a Taanis Chalom? And so Rabbi Chait's answer was, it has to like really disturb you, you know, and like, but he said that you'd have to like fast as soon as you start off, like as soon as you wake up. Whereas the Rambam does not really qualify. He doesn't even say your soul is anguish. He just says someone who sees a bad dream, you know? So I don't know if the Rambam has that same level. I also just want to point out here that the Yad Peshuta, who is a commentary on the Rambam, quotes the Gemara about how this tears up a Gazar Din of 70 years. And he quotes Rav Hai Gaon, who explains why fasting on Shabbos is special, because that Gemara was about fasting on Shabbos. So he says, V'imir b'yom Shabbos, nidcha taanis, okay, Umashu shaitiu rozal taanis Chalom b'Shabbos. The fact that Chazal permitted you to have a fast on Shabbos, Zehu Kishi HaChalom Kasha Me'od Harbe. That's if it's a really bad dream, okay? V'hu shira'a oso nafsho aguma alav lefi she'eno yodea mahu. This is if your soul is extremely anguished about it because you don't know what it is. V'ein lo onik Shabbos. So he says that in order to fast on Shabbos, Rav Hai Gaon says you have to be so distressed that it ruins your Shabbos. Then you're allowed to fast on Shabbos. He says, and when you're fasting, sover shatanis moyolo, you believe that the fast will help you. V'tov l'sheves l'shev b'tanis b'Shabbos, v'alkufo gavd b'inen l'shev tanis b'tanisa, ukishiyesha b'tanis b'Shabbos omer. Okay, hold on a second. That's not the one I wanted, although that's important. There's another Rav Hai Gaon that says, hold on. Umafarshi Rabbanan, onik shal adam kishroi chalom kasha b'leile shabbasos l'shev tanisa bo b'yom. So this is another answer, which is that oh sorry, you know what? I'm gonna read this from the beginning. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, this is Rav Hai Gaon. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Mishum Rabbi Yossi ben Zimra, Hayusha b'Taanis b'Shabbos, Kohen lo Gazar Din shel Shivim Shana. Someone who fasts on Shabbos with this kind of fast gets his decree of 70 years torn up. But then he gets punished for the halachos of Shabbos. Nachna amrirna delesa laha shmaitza ela. So we hold that teaching only applies to a Taanis Chalom, meaning it's not all other fasts, it's only Taanis Chalom. There's no such thing as one action that it itself gives you reward and punishment. If it's a mitzvah, you're not going to get punished for it. And if you get punished for it, then it's like an avera. Shabbos has a mitzvah of oneg, and the only permitted a fast on it for someone who dreamed on Shabbos and only on that day that you can fast it. And someone whose heart is attached to it because he thinks that there's a danger. The Rabbanan explained, it is enjoyable for a person who sees a harsh dream on Shabbos night to fast on Shabbos day. So this seems to be a second theory about why you can do it on Shabbos. The first theory was the dream was so bad that you're not going to have oneg Shabbos anyway. This is saying that there's an oneg to fast on Shabbos because you know that fasting is a remedy for a bad dream. And he says, also this is part of the beginning theory. If he does not fast, he'll be sitting and despondent all day long. And he will not enjoy his oneg because of fear. And when he sits in a fast and knows that his decree is being torn up, there's no oneg greater than that. So the reason why you have to make up for it with a fast is because you fulfilled oneg, but not according to halacha. Okay, with eating and drinking. Fine. And then there's one more theory about why fasting on Shabbos is special, which I want to read, and that'll be the last point. Yeah, tomorrow.
What are sources again? Where is this?
This is in Rav Hai Gaon.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just think it's interesting that this is like a pretty clear lines up with Ayala's explanation that this is to make you feel better.
Yes,
like if
definitely.
It's the cause that you're so disturbed that you can't enjoy Shabbos.
Right. I should have clarified that this is not taking the teshuvah route, right? It seems to be taking more of the making you feel better route. Yeah. Last thing I want to read about this fasting on Shabbos, and then we'll summarize everything, is from Rabbeinu Hananel, which says, "Kibalnu mi Rabbeinu d'biyosha b'Taanis Chalom Mairi," that this whole halacha about fasting on Shabbos and turning up the Gazar Din of 70 years is only talking about a Taanis Chalom. Kidakaimalan yafet Taanis lachalom keish lenoris. Ki kol adam shegazar lav gezerah ra al avon sha'asa. Anyone who gets a bad decree over a sin that he did, magalin ozno aide chalom, it's revealed to him through a dream. What's going to happen to him? Okay, I think this is also not taking the approach we were having. Once he senses this, he should fast, and do tshuva, and God will forgive him. So it is interesting. He's taking the tshuva route, but not from the psychoanalytic source. He's saying that you're actually being shown from Shemayim that you did an avera, that you're going to get something bad that's going to happen to you, and you should use this for tshuva. Shehin Shivim Shana, then once you do tshuva, then even if you've sinned for all your years, which are 70 years, as it says in Tehillim 90, Yemeshin Oseinu Behem Shivim Shana, that an average lifespan is 70 years. Why is your fasting on Shabbos greater than fasting on the weekday? On Shabbos, you have a prepared meal and you have delicacies, which you don't have on the weekday. When you fast on Shabbos, you're going to have greater, it's going to be harder for you to do than fasting on the weekday. Nevertheless, your fasting has the status of Oneg Shabbos. And Rashi gives another explanation here. He says, that you get pain because everyone else is eating enjoyable things on Shabbos and you're fasting. Okay, so just to summarize here, I think we can say that there are three general approaches to having bad dreams that are reflected in halacha. Okay, approach number one, which we did not really see in any of the sources, is that dreams are omens of bad things that can happen. And the reason why you need to have it interpreted for the good is to prevent the bad things from happening. Okay, that we'll call the superstitious way. Okay, and we didn't read any sources that said that. The second approach that we see is is what we see in the Aruch Shulchan, which seems to regard dreams as something that you really shouldn't pay attention to, because unless you're a highly perfected person, then your dreams are just generated by your psyche. And the only reason you should pay attention to it is if you're so anguished that you need to like find some way to shake it off, then halacha gives you an outlet to do that, which is this procedure of Hatavas Chalom. And all the structures of Hatavas Chalom are essentially like, set up to like make you feel better about the dream and not feel like stressed out about it. And, but in general, you shouldn't make recourse to that, and you should really ignore dreams. That's the Aruch Shulchan's way. We can call that the, what should we call that one? The making you feel better approach. I don't know if there's a good term for it. The consolation approach. I don't know. And then you have the Rambam's approach, which is that bad dreams can be should be an impetus for doing teshuva, whether from the Rabbeinu Hananel aspect that God is actually like sending you a message through the dream, which again I don't think is going to happen in the majority of cases, or whether through the psychoanalytic model where dreams are coming from your psyche and can indicate either wishes that can be the basis of you doing tshuva, or from the Lear approach of the psychoanalytic model, which is that it reveals to you certain anxieties that are coming from something in external reality that you can then analyze and then equip yourself to deal better with, or just from any other means of tshuva that are there. Like I gave the shiur on the metaphysical implications of stubbing your toe, and we said in that shiur that like you can use subjective mita connected mita type reasoning to like take painful stimuli and then use them as an opportunity to do tshuva. So if you have a dream, I don't know, about murdering somebody, then you can use that as a way to do tshuva on like your aggressive impulses, or something like that. So I think that personally, I think that the Rambam's approach is the most reasonable of the three, because the Aruch Shulchan's is a wasted opportunity, and the Rambam's is making every use of what's happening to you for your perfection. So I think it's like the most in line with my understanding of what the Torah wants. So that's what I got to say about these two things in dreams. Any questions or comments?
I feel like I think that there is sometimes a place for the Aruch Shulchan approach, even in the framework of like maybe the Rambam is like the most in line with modern psychological understanding. Yeah. Because I think if you're shaken, I think there is like a phenomenon of like you get spooked and like you can't be rational because you're just like spooked, and I feel like
that's a good point.
Having a mechanism to calm down might be a helpful thing.
That's a good point, right? In other words, sometimes when you get spooked on a psychological level that is like not within your conscious grasp, then the only way to address it is in the language of the psyche, and having like a ritual to like deal with this, and like having your friends like interpret it for the good and all that other stuff like can help you to move past that when you can't do anything else with it. Yeah, that's a good point. So that's like the point you made before about it's really for people who can't deal with it in the way that the Rambam is doing it. Yeah, that's a good point. I agree. Okay.
I think that also that even if you can't, that can actually get a person to a point where they can deal with it.
Right. That's also true. Right. Yeah. I agree. Okay. So thanks for coming. Next week we will take off, and Bli Neder the week after that, then we'll have shiur again. Okay. Have a good Shabbos and an early happy Hanukkah.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, you too.